one. Hey everyone, so today is going to be quite a long video. So if you want to learn how to design some type of injection mold or anything really into Fusion 360 that would require injection molding, I actually create my own fishing lures and injection mold them in the garage and go out fishing with them. I like to do this because I can change little aspects here and there. For one example, just kind of showing you, what we end up modeling within the system is something like this. And I won't go into this type of crazy detail because it does take quite a while, but I at least want to show you the basics and get you started. So we'll go ahead and start with a brand new drawing, and just going to move the mic here. So first off, we just want to create some type of sketch. A lot of times too is if you have a hand sketch drawing or anything of that nature, this is the time to kind of upload it. You do that through an insert and you click on canvas, and what you could do is just kind of draw and sketch over it. For this case in particular, we're just going to go ahead and create a blank sketch. Right now is when you want to look at your coordinate system. For my mill, my Z is coming out of plane, so I want to go ahead and sketch it on the XY plane. You can notice up here the X and Y and Z is sticking out. That's where I make sure that I'm good. So we'll go ahead here, click to the front, and just for all intents and purposes, this is where you kind of can create, like I said, your sketch. So for this case, we'll start with 1 inch circle, and just to make it very simplistic, we'll create some type of line here. We'll have a straight back, and then I want some type of taper down for a tail, and then we'll say a nice little paddle tail, something of this nature. Come back here to the sweep, and then trim this up real quick. And then I want a big old belly on it, so we're just going to do a fit spline and say that should be good. Okay. So once you have this kind of set up, this is my general sketch. Again, if you draw it by hand, it's pretty easy to just overlay that. And you would have to skip this part altogether. It's not really pertinent to the design. We'll hit here, finish sketch, and this is where the fun, comes into play. Like I said, I like to draw these sketches so at least I get something to, reference off of, because this next step is really much artistic. It's creating a form, and it's as simple as that. You create the form, click here on box real quick, and we're going to create a 2-point box. Is fine. We're going to select, right now it's asking us what plane do we want to select it on. So I'm going to draw it the same plane as that, and switch back here to front. And I'm going to just create a 2 profile plane, or a box, and basically just kind of get around my part. We'll actually level out the top to match, and then we'll just freeform that tail to make it higher, because I want the back to be somewhat straight for this one. So you can see here, this creates a this box, this kind of like a forum box, and this is where you can kind of design, is it, how wide is it, how many slices you have on your box. A lot of times the length faces, that's what you need to change. If you wanted more detail or more pull points, you can make it 10. For this case, let's say just 5 for right now. I'm gonna move that so it doesn't crinkle. Sorry if you're hearing weird noises in the background. All right, so 5 faces, the height was about right, and you do want to make sure that your symmetry is clicked on, and wherever this green line is means that's your mirror line. So if you had, let's say you wanted the width, that would be this green line, so anything changed on this side would change on the bottom. And then length is really anything, you know, changing in there. We don't want length, we don't want width, we definitely want height though, because we want this symmetrical on both sides. And we'll say it's a new body. Once you're done with this, that's basically it. You're just going to be pressing and pulling and clearing from there. So let's just change this to 6. I think that might give us a little extra. Okay. Click OK here. And this is now I think it's the fun part, but what you're going to do is select lines as you can to kind of shape and mold this box into something that looks like that sketch that you had. So this is very simple. Like I said, you're going to come up here, click on Modify, and this is where you're going to select your lines. So I'm holding Shift right now, and all I'm doing is selecting all of these lines, and I'm going to go ahead and drag this back. I want a little bit more facets in the back here. You can see that, you know, we need to kind of have a facet to make the tail properly. So just shifting these kind of towards the back end just gives us that more play. In the center, I want it kind of really evenly curved. So I'm going to kind of line up these edges with the main, you know, harsh points that I created. So in this case, we'll kind of line that up with the end of the belly. Just kind of keep pulling it. Again, you can click on the front here. It's easier to see. And line that up. This one in the middle, what we're going to do is try to... Oh, that clicked on the point. So be careful. You do want to see the line, not the points. We don't want to get there yet. And then we'll click on this one. So this is going to be kind of my center point. Again, it's kind of shift things, so we might have to shift that back, but we'll say that's pretty much good for right now. And then I want that sweep to come up to the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and move this facet, or this edge. I'm going to move that more towards the front. And you can kind of see here that kind of matches up there. Again, it's just going to be playing around with this. That'll be good for all intents and purposes today. So now we're going to start grabbing some lines, and we're just going to start shifting. Sorry, my phone's vibrating right next to the microphone, so my apologies. We're just going to start grabbing lines and shifting and kind of matching this form. And you'll see here, you know, if you grab just one line and pull up, you know, it's going to start matching all of that. And then we're going to come over here just to this bottom line, shift this up to where we wanted it. You can see how the shape is kind of just taking form. We're going to pull the belly down just a little bit more. Take a look. Okay, we can come up on this front just a little bit. And I won't focus too much on this. You know, we'll just get the general shape. But, you know, this is kind of your base point. This is where you're going to start shooting from. And then, like I said, we're going to get a little bit crazier in the tail just to kind of give it some shape. But this was probably the hardest thing that I, you know, had to do, trying to figure out how to create, you know, something. I'm used to not like the parametric modeling system in AutoCAD. I'm used to just drawing it by hand, or, you know, and then trying to revolve. The problem with that is when you get into your making it 3D, like when you're actually doing your tool paths, that's when things get a little kind of crazy. So I don't recommend, you know, really doing that method. I would just say more or less, you know, do it this way. So yeah, we're going to keep just kind of pulling. When you click on points versus lines, it's going to shift, you know, that point, but it's going to change kind of your model. So, you know, just be cognizant of that. You can click on really anything if you need to shift anything around. For this one, we're going to grab like this face and this face together, and this is how we're going to start making that tail, grabbing, you know, these 2 points right here and kind of squishing them in. just trying to form, a paddle tail itself. And then grab this point. We can grab that and pull that up. You can see it didn't grab that point. So we'll kind of grab that one and pull down accordingly. But yeah, this is basically, that's the hardest part. Just keep kind of massaging this. Take a look at your forms. You are going to be, cutting this in half. So just make sure that, you're cognizant of that. We're going to make the belly kind of bulged out just a little bit, give it a little bit of roundness. And yeah, that looks kind of, for this case, that looks kind of good. You can keep playing around. You're just clicking on points. Don't overcomplicate this by any means. Just, you're just basically just trying to make that shape that you sketched out. But for this case, I think this is fine for the tutorial. So once you're done here, we're going to go ahead and finish form. And we can go ahead and click off our sketch. What I like to do then right now is kind of make sure my model is well within the origin. So I'm going to draw one more sketch and create a line, basically down the middle. So then I can line up, top down view where I need to shift this part. I should have done a plane offset or something of that nature, but this is fine. So we'll go finish sketch, turn sketches back on, and I will click on this, and all we want to do is move it. So we're just kind of moving it to the middle. You can see it's not super hard to do it because how we drew this box, it's just by eye, and most of the time actually the snaps, if you just zoom in, you can get tighter snaps with AutoCAD, but that's about center for me. So now we're going to go ahead and build our material. So basically our mold, what is the end goal of this. So I'm going to go ahead and place a box, and let's say it's 6 inches. Oh, that's not long enough. We apparently made this 9 inches long. So say we're going 10 inches. And we made it about 4 inches tall. Hit OK. And so we draw our box. And then what we're going to do is extrude this box on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and click here. We're going to drag this out. What I like to do is at least know my material, so when I'm making the part, so for this case we're extruding it out 1 inch just to cover the part. You want to make sure you don't cut it. You just want this as a new body for right now. And click OK. And then we're going to come onto this side, extrude, click on that, and don't do that. That was bad. We want to kind of view our sketch again, the box, and we can turn off bodies if we want. And we know we extruded that other surface 1 inch, so we're going to come back this way 1 inch. It's yelling at me because I turned bodies off for right now. New body, that's fine, and click OK. So now we have 2 squares. It's splitting our part. This is kind of where the magic happens now, is we're going to go and start doing the cutting of our operation, I guess, where we are going to hollow out the blocks with our model in it. So I'm going to go here to combine, and I'm going to change this to a cut operation. I'm going to keep the tool because I'm going to cut the fish out of both parts. So my target body, let's say this back one for right now. Our tool body is going to be our fish, so body 1. We're going to just click on body 1, and we're going to say cut and keep tool. Now we're going to do that one more time except on the other face. So I'm going to click this body. I'm going to make sure my cutting tool is the fish, and I'm going to keep my tool just so I have it, and click OK. Now what that did is it just made a indentation in these 2 parts, and we will go ahead and move. Click on bodies, we're going to move this body and we're going to swing it around like a book and click OK. So there is our molds that we just created. You can kind of see they're both hollowed out exactly how we wanted the fish to be done. And this is where, you know, well, what about the injection ports? What about the air holes? All that stuff. So this is where I like to do it, because this is the hard part, is just getting the main mold figured out, these two parts separated and, you know, separate bodies. Now, the nice thing with Fusion 360 is I just go back in time before I made that operation. So we're back in time, and I'm going to come back to just the fish. So just body one. Excuse me. So this is where, you know, we just moved it. We got the plane. All of this stuff is after the fact. This is where Fusion 360 excels. I'm going to create a new sketch here. I'm going to draw a circle, basically. So we're going to go top down, create a circle. For this case, let's say 0.5, because that's my injection. And we're going to go extrude that sketch. Turn sketches back on. I just don't need to see really sketch 1, 2, or 3 right now. And we're going to extrude this circle. And we're going to overshoot it because we just want it cut out of the part. Click OK. And then I'm going to create another sketch on this face. We're going to go ahead and view it from this angle. I'm going to just kind of eyeball it, but right there it looks about right. And finish sketch. And we're going to extrude this into the part. This one again is going to be a new body. Click OK. And I'm going to just press pull this end so it's in there. And then what I'm going to do is press pull. Whoops. Click OK. And I'm going to press pull one more time on this face and zoom, you know, get it kind of closer. All right, so that's my injection. If you were going to be, you know, using a different size hole, let's say your injector has, you know, 1/2 inch hole and then a 1/4 inch actual shaft, that's where you would be modeling this out, you know, with your dimensions, known dimensions of where the circle needs to be. That's kind of, you know, the overall plan of what you should be doing. And then one more thing real quick. We will go ahead and draw in a circle for the air vent. And we're going to put one really tiny, let's say 0.125, and we'll put one more up here, 0.125. Okay, finish sketch. Now those did draw on the opposite plane over here, so just an FYI. When we extrude these, we can go ahead and just pull them back, just kind of same before. We'll just say new body, and direction, we will start it on an offset. And let's just say offset's going to be -8 inches. Ooh, the other way, +8. There we go. That just brought it over, you know, and I don't see any of those sticking out, just right out the part, which is what we wanted. Click OK. So this is where you want to join everything together, because we want that one single body one to have all of these features. So what I do is I like to use the combine tool, select my model, select all my attributes, and instead of cut, we will say join. And we don't want to keep the tool this time. We want all of those merged into body one, and click OK. So that's all been merged back into body one, and all I'm going to do is drag this over. Cool part is turn off body one, and you can see everything got cut out automatically in our mold. Exactly kind of what we were looking for. Like I said before, if you have an injection port, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. What I like to do is I'll create a sketch and pick this plane. One of two options: either we roll back before we moved that item, so we'll go ahead back to here where we can see it. Again, sorry, create a sketch. We'll just pick this surface as our sketching plane. We'll pick the center of the hole, and let's say we have a 1-inch diameter port. That's where I would do this operation. It's just easier to remember. And then we'll finish sketch. Extrude it. Click on here. Come down 0.3 just for the sake, and we'll say cut. Click OK, and we'll scoot over to the right. So if you've ever bought an injection mold for fishing lures, that kind of would look familiar, right? Everything should look familiar. Sometimes you do need extra, because of the volume of your mold, sometimes you do need to make this hole a lot larger, or you need some type of reservoir in here for this plastic to suck in any internal plastic. So, just keep that in mind when you're doing this. You might have to play with that. That's why it's pretty much, once you start learning how to do this, you might have to create like a larger, circle within there, and just an FYI. So let's go ahead and get into the machining operation, because this is also another fun little item that, it took me a while to figure it out. So I would hope someone would actually show me how to do it back in the day. So what I'm going to do is just machine one at a time. So I'm going to turn off body 3, and we're going to just focus on this body right here. So going to come up and turn off my sketches. So I'm just left with a blank slate. That's what I want to mill. So I'm going to go to, from design tab, I'm going to go here to manufacture. Now, this is where a couple things start. We have to set up our material. That's one of the first items. But something that you should probably do, right away is manage your tool library. Your tool library is where all of your tools are saved. So just get very used to coming in and just grabbing, tool libraries accordingly. I've got them set up for my machine. This is just a test one. That's why you see these two. And I've got a couple of these end mills already kind of in there. So for this case, just make sure you kind of come in here. You're going to click either on your local library and click the blue plus sign. And then this is where you're going to add your tool. If you are doing an engraving feature, just an FYI, something else I just learned was Chamfer Mill is your engraving tool. That's if you have like a V-carve bit and you need to do fine detail, you just pick Chamfer Mill and you can, put in the parameters there. And the engrave feature in Fusion 360 actually works quite well, but only if you choose chamfer. All right, so we can have a whole discussion about that one. So I'm going to go ahead here and close this out, and I'm going to mill this out. So I'm going to click on, I like 3D adaptive clearing, especially with my CNC. It's one of the easier operations. Sometimes people get it, and because they draw their parts not using that form tool, they get a lot of faceting, and the machine, like, for example, Fusion 360's got to think about how is it going to perform that operation. So just an FYI, if you're getting some weird issues or whatever, I would say keep refining your form tool and getting that kind of, to the liking that you are seeking for. But yeah, so adaptive tooling, we're going to click our tool. This is where we're going to start with like a flat end mill, and then our finishing operation, we're going to switch to a ball end mill, but we're just going to go ahead flat first. What I like to do is kind of see the geometry, and you know what? I already skipped a step that I said don't skip. We have to go here to setup. We're going to create our setup. Now, just kind of note, when you're doing your setups, Fusion 360 initially defaults to adding extra material to your box, and this can make or break any of your models. So just an FYI, you're gonna have to, be very clear. I want to zero off all of these items. I always just do the relative size box, but you can say fixed size box and just type it in yourself, or a relative size box. Just make sure you change your stock offsets. Unless you're planning to do a facing operation, then leave the stock offset so you can get a nice flat surface. But in this case, my material is already flat, so I'm going to just hug that right up to the machine itself. Once that's there, the next thing to do is determine where your stock is, like what's your zero, what's your origin. So I'm going to pick this upper left corner because that one makes it easier for my machine. And I'm looking at it, my Z-axis, X and Y are flipped. So the easiest way to do this is actually just click the Z. That's exactly the direction my Z needs to go, but my X needs to go the other way. So I'm going to just go ahead and click that. My Y is in the positive direction for my machine, so that's where I'm going to set my coordinate point. You could pick the point down there if your machine's going bottom left. I always do mine off top left because I have more space. Once your X, Y, and Z is set up, your box is set up, everything's good, go ahead, click OK, and that saves in your setup. Now let's go back to 3D Adaptive Clearing. Once 3D Adaptive Clearing is selected, we're going to select our tool. Like I said before, we're going to click our flat end mill. And any of these settings, really doesn't matter. Your surface speed is probably, your cutting feed rates, that's going to matter the most, is your cutting feed rate. Everything else will change, determined, from your inches per minute that you're running. If you're running any faster, let's say 100 inches per minute, it's telling you your feed per tooth. And that's kind of very important. If you're getting into this and you don't know, when you're setting up your tool, start looking at your feed per tooth, and that's telling you what your chip load is. So just kind of pay attention. 0.006 for that small of a mill. Actually, I believe it should be smaller, to be honest with you. So we'll say 150 inches per minute, and that actually brought ours up. So let's drop that down to 100 inches per minute. Let's say 75. 0.005. That's fine. The only way to change your feed, your chip rate, is to change your spindle speed. So if you did like 6,000 RPM, that should have changed. Oh, here, this one. 6,000 RPM, now it's dropping it. So when you get into small bits, just kind of pay attention. Each tool manufacturer has a recommended setting for your tooth, how much material you're taking off per tooth. And the smaller the bit, the smaller that number normally gets. And when you get a little bit larger, you can get a little bit more aggressive, or if your machine allows you to get aggressive. So just play around with the spindle speed, and you'll figure out your surface, your cutting feed rates, accordingly. Obviously, if your machine can't do 6,000 RPM, you setting it here is not going to make your spindle go 6,000 RPM unless you have it set up to your computer. But again, that's more of a more advanced machine. This is where they're setting their RPMs from this menu, from the machine itself. Like when they run their G code, it'll automatically set their spindle to 6,000. If your spindle is like mine and not hooked up and it's manual, it won't matter. So let's go here to geometry. And this is where we're going to try to, get the machine to do what we want it to do. A lot of times people just keep select, stock contours, and things will work out perfect. Sometimes you'll have to come in and select items accordingly, and it does get a little daunting, but always start off with, the regular settings first and then see what happens. We'll just leave everything selected as is. We'll go to heights and make sure that our heights are all set up fine. retract height 0.2 inches, clearance height's 0.6. You know, it's a little high for travel, so we'll just set that down to 0.2. It's our clearance height because it's basing it off of the retract heights. But any more vertical movement, if your machine's got a slow z-axis, that movement's going to take forever to happen. So just an FYI, this is where you're setting those retract rates, and you know, the longer and higher they are, the longer your cut's going to take, because it's going to be moving more than in the material. So a lot of people set these really low. I just like to keep a nice distance just in case something happened during the operation. And then we'll go to passes, and we really won't change anything. The only thing we're going to really look at is the, there should be a material stock to leave. So this is the one thing to look at. It's going to leave 0.02, and that's leaving it for the finishing operation. That's a standard AutoCAD Fusion 360 option. So just an FYI, stock to leave is going to be picked up in our final, you know, finishing passes. Go ahead and click OK, and let's see how this does. So you can see right now it's generating the toolpath. It's about 50% complete. It's clearing quite a bit of material. And you can see it got everything but these final, you know, air vents, which is perfectly fine because we'll try to capture those in the finishing pass. So that's just getting, you know, rough material out. You can see it's a spiral path. It gets to the middle and then it works its way out and then works its way up. So that's a pretty efficient, you know, path. I don't like how this is jumping back and forth. So to remediate that, we're going to go back in here real quick. Right click on adaptive, go to edit. We're going to go back to the geometry. Instead of saying our stock contours, we're going to select, you know, the actual contour that we want it to machine around. So we're going to click here, and you're going to click one more time, and that brings up this crazy menu that's nowhere else in AutoCAD, and you'll see it's got this plus sign and the minus sign, and we're going to go around and we're going to click, you know, roughly the large items of our part. And I'm going to go ahead and click in here because I want this all kind of machined at the same time. And that should be enough to hopefully have Fusion Auto connect all of that. So we'll hit accept, and you'll see it selected everything, including these out, but we know it won't machine it. So let's click OK, and it's going to stay in that bound. So this hopefully should just calculate going inside. And because it was going to the outside over here, that's why it picked up this. So we're going to go back in here one more time. And this happened, so you know, don't be discouraged. We're going to click back into here, click off of this. I'm just going to click and click one more time. I'm going to go in and I'm going to physically select the edges so it does not try to go outside of these bounds. And we'll come in here and click on every edge that I don't want it to machine. And for this case, I'm going to try to force this to just stay within the fish. Click accept the contours. There we go. And click machining boundary. I'm going to say the selection that we just did. That's our selection. We're going to say our tool's inside the boundary. I guess I should have done it this way. Don't mind the stock contours. Delete that. Redo this. Sorry, with the selection. I'm having a Monday. Same thing as before. We're going to click on there again. We're going to just delete all this. Clear this back out. Click on the item. Click it one more time. Manually select all of our faces. Normally you don't have to select into here, but I'm just doing it just to be on the safe side. Go around the fish and click all these edges. There we go. And there should be that one more. Click accept. Now you can see it's got our fish. That's what we were looking for. We'll keep the tool centered on boundary. We don't want it drifting off anywhere else. And go ahead and click OK. And let's see how this does. Looks perfect. Keeps the, moves nice and clean all within here. And then what we can do is we can worry about this shaft later. This is the hardest part, is basically getting this adaptive clear to just select the model portion that you want. As for the second one, we'll go ahead and create another adaptive clear. And this one we can actually just leave all of that. We'll say rest machining. What it's going to do is hopefully remember what we machined out, and it's going to take care of the rest. So let's hit OK, and let's make sure that it doesn't start trying to carve out the fish. Oh, and it did. So we're going to go back in here, and we're just going to select that geometry. Machining boundary, selection. We're going to click on here. We're going to click this long, and click these. And we're just tracing the part. This is kind of a trick that I learned, and I'll hit accept, and you see how it auto closed. I didn't have to click everything, just the general outline. The computer figures it out from there. Click OK, and there it is. It just does it all by itself. All right, so our part's shaping up. We roughed it out. You can see all these different steps, but we left that 0.02, so it's going to leave that. Let's go back here and start doing some finishing operations. The easiest way that I can tell you to finish something in a mill or any type of CNC is doing parallel passes and do them really tight. The reason why is the tool path is nice, fluid, even. It'll catch all the corners. You don't have to start doing, if you want to get really crazy, like spiral, for example, or even this morphed spiral, you end up with these machining marks at the end. So if you can kind of see how it's, kind of all over the place, those are great, but sometimes you're left with those tool marks. So if you're okay with that tool mark being left on your project, then that's fine, but I don't. So I just like doing something very simple, parallel. It's a little bit longer, but to be honest with you, it comes out with great finishing. So I'm going to select my tool. I'm going to change this to the ball end mill. And so ball end mills, use them for your finishing operation. We're going to go ahead, geometry. We're going to just say bounding box, I guess is fine. Or actually, we'll just keep it silhouette for right now. Let's see what it comes up with. Rest machining, we'll click that. Actually, we won't click that. We'll just let this bad boy finish. Make sure stock to leave is unchecked, which it naturally does because this is a finishing operation. And we'll click OK, and let's see what happens here. So what it did was it actually started surface finishing the top of the part. So we'll go ahead here, edit again, and go back into geometry. And I'm going to change it to selection again. And I'm going to pick just the outlines that I really want it to focus on. So I'm going to click on these lines right here. Sometimes you do have to wiggle your mouse over it so the computer actually catches what you're trying to do. And then I'm going to actually just try to do the same thing again and accept that. And there, that grabbed that. And I'm going to want it to go back and forth left to right. So since we saw it was going left to right, we don't have to change the angle yet, but we're going to change the angle for this slot up here. Gonna go ahead here and click OK. And there it is. That's now, coming right in here. But here's my issue. You can see the tool needs to get a lot smaller, closer together to get that nice surface finish. So that's where we go here into passes. And this is where you change your step over. So my step over right now is 0.0625. Don't know why that just closed out on me. But we're going to change this to like 0.002 and click OK. what that's going to do is make a nice tight path, and you can see, you know, it's very nice and tight along here. It's going to leave us a nice surface finish. When we zoom out, you don't see any of those facets anymore. That's how you're going to get a tight, you know, contour tool path. And you can see there's really not much tool lift. You know, these yellow lines are the tool lifting off the part, so it's doing majority of its time in the part. Then what we're going to do is do the same thing to this, except I'm going to change it going vertically because it's a little easier, and we won't care about it having a million steps because it's not a finishing pass. This, you won't see this. This is just for the injection itself. So I will go here to say 3D parallel, make sure my ball is selected, do selection. I'm going to click here. I'm going to kind of rough outline. I need this hard edge. And then I'm going to select that. And if you can hear beeping in the background, my apologies. My neighbor's house caught fire behind us. But anyway, so that should be good. Click accept. That's exactly what we need to do. And remember how I said it's going to go left to right? Well, we want it to go up and down. So this is where we're going to change our orientation. So the pass direction, which is right above step over, we're going to go ahead and change that to 90 degrees and go ahead and click OK. And now what that should do is, yep, cleaned it right up, ran these. And like I said, we don't need the step over to be massive here because we're not going to see it. So why not save the machine time? It's just for an injection port at that point, so who really cares? We don't need it to be 100% perfect. And there you go. That's basically how I designed this. Now, if you're wondering how to export this, just go ahead and click the NC program. What that's going to do is give you this nice screen. You can change your post. Mine's Mach 3. Inside here is Gerbil, Marlin, any type of post processor that you have. For my case, I'm using Mach 3, so we'll leave it there. Operations, I'm gonna, Fusion 360 actually, for whatever reason, took away tool changes, which is very simple to program yourself. It takes you a couple extra steps. We're gonna select these two, click enter. I'm gonna overwrite because Fusion 360 likes to just save things as the same name. View NC code, and there's my G code, ready to go, using my flat end mill. Tool number 1, if you named them different tools and established it, this is where you could combine the files. Set up tool number 2, you know, and Fusion, you know, again, removing something that, yeah. Rapid moves is reduced to match the feed rate of cutting. So if you do a faster rapid move, they've already kind of pushed it in here. Unfortunately, you have to buy Fusion 360 to get unrestricted rapid moves, which... absolutely crazy. Oh, Fusion. You could set up a very simple program to just actually look after Z moves and change things if you really wanted to. But it's fine. It's not the end of the world. In this is why I'm setting up these tool paths to have the least amount of rapids that you can. Also, G54, something to note, that's your fixture. So if you've set up your fixture as G56, Fusion auto sets it to G54, but on my mill, I like to set, you know, G54 as one of my tool holders, another tool holder if I'm doing like a double clamp on the bench, setting it up G54, G55. I believe you get all the way up to G58 with Mach. Those are just your offsets, your tool offsets. So make sure that you change that. If you forget to do that, then you could really mess up your part. And then I will go here and just run a quick simulate just to make sure that we didn't miss anything. We will leave the stock. I deselected toolpath and click OK. So you can see it's coming in here, doing an adaptive clear, coming over here, starting to do that adaptive clear. We'll speed this up. Once you get done with the simulation, this is kind of the other neat part, is you can look at your statistics. How long is it going to take with the speeds and feeds that you've actually set based upon your machining. So we're going to just kind of speed this up as fast as possible at this point because there's a lot of passes. A lot of times I'll change this so it doesn't run that much, but something you're looking for in here is any yellow or warnings or anything that could pop up, and that's just meaning like your tools run into something or you know, any type of issue whatsoever. We're going to go ahead and skip to the end here, and hopefully it just processes that. And this is where we get into statistics. So if I ran this part right now with the speeds that I'd set, you know, I think it was 100 inches per minute or 75 inches per minute, it's going to take 2 hours and 29 minutes to actually do this. And the machining distance, you know, it's 557 feet worth of travel left, right, you know. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing your operations. You do want to, you know, kind of look at your machining time, try to optimize your tool paths as best as possible, you know, and go from there. So hopefully that gives you a good insight. I wish someone showed me this back in the day. Like I said, this is something that I've created, you know, on the side. It's really like a test piece, again, using all that. I did draw some sketches and project scales onto this fish, as well as built, you know, some extra planes in here and built some fins, as well as kind of free shaped some gills on this. And I will show you the manufacturer of this part. I did it in one mold, so I could just do it in one pass, put some known indexing points on the mold itself. We'll go ahead here and turn off that fish model. So we'll turn off, I believe, body 9. Yep. And I set it up so I could just put this in the machine. It'll cut out both parts. And then what I did was I just took the bandsaw and cut this right in half. My indexing points automatically lined up both sides because they're obviously positioned the same. And I was able to get one mold in one shot. And you can see all my extra air vents, all the extra details, and then as well as the entrance. One thing that I did have to do is widen this out and make, because the bait is so large, I did have to create some type of reservoir in here. So when the inside or the outside cooled and the inside was still molten, it could pull in extra material. So I did have to widen up the mouth. This was too small, and I had to make it quite larger, and then as well as increase the shaft diameter to kind of hold more liquid plastic, so when this cooled it actually sucked it in. But that's trial and error, you know, with worms and small stuff, you know, curlicue worms or anything of that nature. It's fairly straightforward. You don't need that reservoir. It's when you start getting into larger injection molds, that's when you have to start worrying about it, especially with like a plastisol or plastisol type soft plastic. So again, hopefully that helped you, and have any questions, comments, please, you know, leave it in the video below. And like I said, I'm sorry if this was a long video, but hopefully you learned something today, and catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.